First, I'd like to welcome Sophie Gray, the founder of Dive Through, a mental wellness company that helps people navigate stress and take charge of their mental well-being. She also shares her work with an audience of over 400,000 people through her personal social channels. Health and wellness website Greatest has named her among the 100 most influential people in health and wellness 3 years in a row. Her work has been featured in Cosmopolitan magazine, People, and numerous other media outlets across North America. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, Sophie.
Thank you so much for having us and for having this really, really important conversation about mental health, because I know so many people are needing the reminder that they're not alone in their mental health struggles and that there are actionable things that they can be doing.
It's our pleasure, and we're so honored to have you join us tonight. Next, it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Kim Helmans, a professor and chair of the Department of Neuroscience at Carleton University. Her current research focuses on student mental health, with a focus on how current life stressors, cannabis use, and social media among university students relate to mental health and academic outcomes. She's also the co-host of the award-winning podcast, Minding the Brain. Welcome to the show, Dr. Helmans.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. I'm really looking forward to this conversation with all of you.
And last but certainly not least, also joining us tonight is Dr. Shimi Kang, an award-winning medical doctor, researcher, and neuroscience expert. Dr. Kang provides practical science-based tools for health, happiness, and achievement in the workplace, the classroom, and at home. She's also the author of The Tech Solution: Creating Healthy Habits for Kids Growing Up in a Digital World. Welcome to the show, Dr. Kang.
Thank you, and super excited to be here having this conversation on mental health. You're right, we have to flatten that mental health curve right now, even before the pandemic, and certainly now during this holiday season.
Dr. Kang, thank you again so much. And you're also giving away a copy of your book to your viewers. I want to thank you so much for that. And to our viewers who are watching the show tonight, if you'd like to win a copy, simply send a Facebook message to us on the Rogers TV Ottawa Channel 22 page, and we will enter your name in a draw to win. Now, I'd like to start the conversation by asking each one of you about your own unique journey with mental health and what led you to pursue this area for a living. Sophie, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about how your company came about.
Absolutely. So not having the education as these other two incredible women have, I really come more from a felt experience with my personal background and Dive Through as a company. So mental health was something that I navigated really early on in life, really struggling with low self-esteem, bullying, self-harm, and even attempted suicide. So really struggling from a young age. And that really pushed me in a direction in my career and in my adult life to really strive for acceptance. And that led me to the social media channels that I built. And that experience really added on to the pressure that I think a lot of young people experience on social media, in school, and in life as a whole. So having had this mental health experience and having had a large social media profile, I actually ended up having a panic attack on an airplane, and I ended up having to drive across the country. So I'm here in Edmonton, Alberta, so I had to drive home from Toronto, and in that experience, I had several more panic attacks. I chose 4 hours on a flight alone with my thoughts for 38 hours. And that experience really allowed me to very clearly see the space that I was in with my mental health and how I had been really ignoring myself and how I was feeling and all of the past that I had experienced. And that led me to really taking a serious look at what I could do for my mental health and how I could take charge of it. So that's a journey that I embarked on for myself personally, going to therapy, working with different doctors, trying journaling, breathing exercises, really doing everything under the sun to really look for those solutions or those resources, those coping mechanisms. And very fortunately, it really helped. And I went from experiencing multiple panic attacks a day to maybe one every few months, and really have taken charge of my mental health. And that led me to Dive Through in the work we're doing with our company, where I really wanted to empower people to have those tools for themselves, because I think that was what was really missing for me in my youth and into adulthood, was really being able to navigate the challenges that came up. So that's why I arrived where I am, and I'm very passionate about having conversations like these to really remind people that they're not alone, and that, again, they're those actionable tools that they can deploy in their own lives.
Thank you so much, Sophie, for sharing a little bit of your journey with us. I'm going to ask you more later on in the show about what kind of resources people can access through your company and some of the wisdom and insights that you've gained along the way. But I'd like to go back to Dr. Kim Hellmans. Tell us a little bit about the field of neuroscience and what drew you to it to pursue it for a living.
Sure. And first of all, Sophie, thank you for sharing that story. It's always really awesome to hear people talk about their own journey with mental health. And as you were talking, it reminded me of that quote. I think it's Freud: "Let your vulnerability be your strength." And I feel like you've channeled that into developing your company. So for me, as a neuroscientist, my journey started out actually about 20 years ago when I was an undergraduate at McGill University. I was entering into a psychology undergraduate, and I really was interested in actually becoming a clinical psychologist. And I very quickly learned that we didn't really know what caused mental illness, and I started taking classes that were more to do with the brain and the underlying sort of functions of what causes our behaviors. And I quickly fell in love with figuring out the why. So I was really fascinated with understanding what could go wrong in the brain to contribute to mental health outcomes. And so I kind of stumbled into neuroscience back in the 90s and started my PhD and haven't really looked back.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I want to hear more about your research with university students and the impact of addiction and social media on their academic outcomes. So I know that's a focus for you, but I'd like to go back to Dr. Shimmy Kang. I had a chance to read your book earlier, and I was fascinated by some of the examples that you brought up when it comes to the role that technology is playing increasingly in our world. And there was one example that really stood out for me, and that was one of your patients, a young boy who actually locked his mother up in the basement for 3 days so that he could play a video game uninterrupted. It's absolutely fascinating, and you would never even think, you could never even imagine something like that. And I'm curious how you came into this area of work as someone who is an MD. Tell me a little bit about the parallels and what drew you to pursue this for a living.
Well, I feel like it was, I was born to do this maybe. When I was a young child, my sister, who's 12 years older than me, is a science teacher, and I asked her for a human brain model, I think when I was in grade 4 or grade 5. So I've always been so interested in the human brain. I went to medical school, and part of that journey, I ended up working at the World Health Organization in Geneva, Switzerland. And at that time, the amazing finding was stress was the #1 health epidemic of the 21st century. And I was there when that research came out, and it was just amazing to know that, we have mastered the skies and the oceans, but we have not mastered our mind, and we have a long way to go. So I ended up becoming a psychiatrist, and then doing what's called a fellowship in addiction psychiatry at Boston Harvard University, where I really got deep into the science of motivation and really how are we motivated, and especially the young brain, the developing brain, that isn't fully mature until the age of 24 anyway. So, I came back and I started a program for mental health and addiction for young people. And then I realized when I became a mother myself, I have 3 children, and my oldest son has ADHD and written output. My daughter has dyslexia. I myself have ADHD, which I didn't really come to terms with until my kids were born, and I had to kind of see it all through their eyes and realize that this is something that I had been living with. And I really turned my efforts and attention into parenting, because I believe that there is so much prevention that can happen at an early age. And that led to me writing that first book that you just talked about, called The Dolphin Parent, which really is a metaphor for the science of parenting. I talk about the dolphin being a authoritative, firm but flexible style, and parents that use play, others, social connection, and downtime, a balanced lifestyle really is the key pillars. And that book led me to write my next book, The Tech Solution, because the number one or two question I always got when I did my keynote speaking or interviews was about technology. And I believe technology is the issue of our time in terms of young people and their brain development. So yeah, I'm just so pleased that we are having these conversations, and Kim's work, incredible work in the sciences, and Sophie's work in social media, and your work. This is exactly what we need to be doing at this moment in time.
Thank you so much, and I want to hear more about that. We're just about to go to break, but when we come back, lots more about the role of stress on the human brain and how you can conquer mental health in 2021. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Hi, I'm Harriet Clooney. Come check out my show, Scrap Cooking, where I'm going to show you how to use the bits and bobs, the ends, the pieces of things that you might otherwise throw in the compost. I'm going to show you how to turn them into something delicious.
Are you a woman experiencing abuse? Do you know a woman experiencing abuse? Help is available any time of day or night. Sheltersafe.ca is an online map that helps you find a women's shelter or transition house that meets your needs so you can live a life free from violence. Sheltersafe.ca. Help is just a click away.
Don't let limited mobility affect your lifestyle.
I want you to push one arm forward.
Whether it's from surgery, an injury, or just time itself, when we move, we can improve our lifestyle. Join Anita Finley each week for a series of workouts that you can do in the comfort of your own home. All you need is a sturdy chair.
This is not about you sitting to watch me. This is about you sitting and joining me.
Tune into Move and Improve right here on Rogers TV.
Hi, welcome back to Ottawa Experts. I'm your host, Barbara Balfour, and on tonight's show, we're talking about some tips and tricks to enjoy better health mentally and emotionally in 2021. We're joined tonight by very special guests, Dr. Shimmy Kang, Dr. Kim Hellmans, and Sophie Gray. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining us tonight. Before we went to break, we talked a little bit about each of your own unique journeys towards mental health and towards the area that you've decided to pursue for a living. And now I want to switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about how your line of work has been affected by the pandemic, which of course, as we are on air, as we go to air is still ongoing. Maybe Sophie, we can start with you. I imagine the demand for the services from your company has only surged in the last few months. Tell us a little bit about the demand that you've seen and maybe any trends that you've noticed.
Absolutely. So we actually are an early on startup, and we had only launched back in November 2019. So we were just getting going from November to March there. And when March hit, I really realized that I had always known that mental health was a very necessary thing. And when I look at my journey, I realized that I had personally experienced something that led to me finally focusing on my mental health. And from those kind of early couple of months, I really realized that mental health in the pandemic is going to be that thing for a lot of people. that really jumpstart their journey with mental health, and finally realizing that regardless of if it's a mental illness or general stress and anxiety, we all have mental health and we all have to care for that. So I think that's been the biggest thing that we've noticed as we look at the trends, as we look at what's happening, as we look at the people that are turning to our services, and having more and more people looking for that support, and also looking just of where to even start. I think when we look at mental health, it can be a really, really overwhelming thing to get started with, and dive through. The goal of dive through is to really give people those initial beginning steps, those initial conversations in a way that makes it relatable, easy to understand, and maybe that step you take before you're ready for therapy, or if you can't access therapy, because unfortunately the barrier to entry with therapy and even sometimes going to the doctor can be so high. So we've really noticed that this has been that kind of reckoning moment for a lot of people, which is of course absolutely devastating, but it's something that we need our attention on because we all have mental health, and now we're all really learning that firsthand, and is really this opportunity for us to finally take a look at taking care of ourselves mentally and emotionally.
Now, Kim, one of your areas of study is, of course, how stress impacts the human brain, and this has been one of the most stressful years in recent memory. Talk to us a little bit about your area of research and how COVID has played into that.
Sure. So I study student mental health. I was studying it before COVID struck. I was really interested in trying to understand the relationship between mental health symptoms that are experienced amongst university students and how that relates to coping with substances, cannabis, alcohol, and Shimmy also look at social media. And then we also relate some of these things to key biomarkers that we know that relate also to stress and inflammation in the body. So we were already running studies looking at how stress impacts mental health and how that relates to coping, and then how we can determine these relationships in light of specific biomarkers. And we were studying this kind of all the way through prior to the pandemic. And then the pandemic struck. And in March 2020, we realized that we were actually collecting mental health symptoms prior to, during, and even after when the pandemic struck. And so we've been actually continuing on to explore, and this is only online studies because sadly, you asked how our lives have been affected. Well, we had to shut down all our in-person studies. We were no longer able to take saliva or blood from participants in person because, of course, that was considered a health risk. So we were only able to capture, our research continued, but only in the online environment. So we've been looking at mental health symptoms. We've been tracking them pre-COVID, during, post, and now, well, post continuing to exist. But so we've been looking at it and now from September to December, which is when the fall academic term began for our students. And as we're all aware, university students are stressed to begin with, right? They're experiencing stress regardless of COVID. And we can look at COVID as yet another stressor that is being put onto the student population, and understanding how that's impacting them as an already vulnerable population.
Now, one of your areas of study is addiction, and I think many of us tend to think about, drugs and alcohol when we think of addictions. But Shimmy, in your work, in your book, The Tech Solution, you speak a lot about online addiction, video gaming, which has been recognized by the World Health Organization as an actual disorder, porn addiction, and how it's affecting young people's lives. Talk to us a little bit about how we can exist in a world where technology and overuse of technology has always been a problem, but I think it's been amplified even more now that we're forced to exist in this virtual world because of the pandemic.
Right. Yeah. So early data from the pandemic, my book actually released in August, right smack in the middle. And right around that time, early data came out that showed there was an increase in cyberbullying reporting by about 85%. There was an increase in hate, anti-Asian, anti-Indigenous, anti-Black, anti-women, anti-LGBTQ online. There was an increase in video gaming and video gaming addiction. This all it makes sense. It wasn't a surprise. we all went, the technology suddenly became even more embedded in our lives. Prior to the pandemic, young people were on their phones 7 to 10 hours a day, and teenagers were averaging 150 checks on their phone. So, the pandemic really opened up this conversation and gave us insights on one hand to the dangers of tech, but on the other hand, of course, the power of tech and how important tech is to social connection and keeping us looking and seeing each other, and to innovation and all of the amazing things that tech can do, including online learning. So, that I think now we're at this place. And when I look at my own journey in the pandemic, I had to suddenly go from doing keynote speaking in big auditoriums to webinars online. I had to adapt. I have a program called Dolphin Kids where we teach social, emotional, cognitive skills to young children. And we usually do it in camps. And we had to go virtual, and we're virtual over the holiday break. And we actually started a new program called Kids Helping Kids, because teenagers were bored. So we're having older kids teaching younger kids about their passion projects. It could be coding, photography, public speaking, art. So it was really wonderful to see, if you give young people healthy tech, how they can use it and engage it in service of their good. And then the other project is been working on an app called Spark Mindset, which helps parents and teachers teach children those 3 key areas of play, social connection, and mindfulness downtime. And so that also got accelerated. So I think, like many people in this pandemic, in some ways there was a course correction. In some ways we were now, a bit less busy, having dinner together more, which is a good thing. Businesses and projects are moving online and opening up opportunities, but also really we have to be mindful of how we are using tech and doing it in that healthy way.
I'm wondering, Sophie, how social media has affected your mental health before and during the pandemic.
Yeah, I always like to joke and say I'm a child of the internet. I feel really fortunate, though, to have only had social media around the age of 14 and 15, so not even at that 10 to 14 age. I feel like when I look at what children are dealing with and youth are dealing with today in terms of social media, then I reflect back on the struggles that I had. I couldn't even imagine them being amplified, how impactful it's going to be for their mental health. And having had my entire career based around the platform, doing it for the last 8 years of my life, really noticed how we build this identity online. And we build this idea of ourselves online that's completely tailored to engagement, to likes, to comments, to following, to build these social profiles that, yes, can be lucrative and can be an opportunity for a career path. But a lot of the time when we're not doing them with the right mindset, the right skills, the right tools, that a lot of the time our parents can't teach us because they don't really know themselves. It can be really damaging. And even this time during quarantine, just noticing this spike in everyone's screen time that they're having and really realizing the importance of setting boundaries. I feel very grateful that I had really established boundaries over the last couple of years to ensure that I'm using the platforms in a really mindful way. So my kind of always the biggest suggestion I have is to be setting kind of parameters around yourself of, is it engaged scrolling? Is it mindless scrolling? Is there a hard date or hard time, that you can get off of your phone? For example, I leave my phone downstairs at 7:30 p.m. every single night and then don't touch it until I've been up for an hour. Those are pretty dramatic habits, and of course starting small, but just knowing with the pandemic, especially, the access to information is nothing we've ever had before. And the ability to get breaking news every single moment, just thinking those initial months on Twitter were just so overwhelming. So really recognizing how that's impacting your life and taking a moment to reflect on that. And then asking yourself, what boundaries can I set? How can I use these platforms intentionally, mindfully, and in a way that supports me and doesn't diminish me, leave me feeling anxious, overwhelmed. And that's an ongoing conversation with yourself, an ongoing battle, but those habits and those boundaries are so essential to establish.
Well, those are great points, Sophie. And you mentioned access to news and information, but I think increasingly, especially in the time of COVID, we go online to seek connection. And Shimi, in your book, you talk about teaching children how to find friends and how to be a good friend. What are your thoughts on the ability or perhaps inability to make meaningful connections online, within the framework of healthy technology?
Right. Yeah. So maybe I'll take a minute and explain kind of the different categories of tech. Which I lay out in the book, and I talk about it as a diet. Really, the message here is to understand tech the way we understand food, that it impacts our body and mind the same way. We have to teach it the same way. We have to start early. It has to be repetitive conversations. And we have to understand in teenage years, they may go off their diet, eat a bit more junk food, but they will come back if you get those healthy habits. So there's 3 types of general tech consumption. So one is toxic tech. That is technology that releases cortisol, the stress neurochemical. That is tech that might lead to sleep deprivation, prolonged sitting, the blue light, comparing your life to others, fear of missing out, bullying, and hate, of course. Then so that is the toxic food. Here I have my can of Coke. We want to avoid sugary drinks in childhood. So avoid that toxic tech. And then there's the junk tech. So I have a bag of chips here, and a little bit of junk food is okay on a Friday night, or pizza and whatever. It's not going to kill you, but junk tech is full of dopamine. It's like the sugar, right? It's addicting. It's short-term pleasure. There's empty calories. You're just eating a bag of chips. Like Sophie said, you're mindless. You're zoning out on social media or zoning out on a video game. So limit and monitor that. And then what you want to consume is the healthy tech. And there's 3 categories of healthy tech. There's the category you mentioned, which is connection. So studies show that FaceTime and URL and Zoom and these types of platforms actually do release oxytocin, our neurochemical of bonding and trust. There is tech that leads to serotonin or creativity, like Sophie's work, like gratitude journaling, and being creative, and robotics and coding and making photographs and making videos as opposed to consuming and watching them. That's serotonin. And then there is the healthy tech that leads to endorphins, self-care. So mindfulness, sleep, Fitbits. So when we consume those 3 positive neurochemicals, endorphin, oxytocin, serotonin, through behaviors of play, others, or downtime, now we actually have a framework to guide children, something they understand, guide them towards the healthy consumption.
That's very eye-opening. Thank you so much. We're just about to go to break. When we come back, I want to talk more about some positive coping strategies with stressors. We'll be right back after this.
Each week on Grill This, Smoke That, Steph Legary showcases delicious recipes from across Canada, all done on the grill. Join Steph and his special guests on Grill This, Smoke That, Fridays on Rogers TV.
There are soldiers in my family. I first joined the Legion to honor their service. Now I volunteer there to be of service myself. I know my membership helps Canadian veterans get the support they need. I've personally seen it help veterans get through some pretty dark times. Many have come out stronger than ever. For a lot of them, the Legion feels like home. It's nice to be part of that.
Summer days, summer nights, lots of things to do, places to go, and people to see. If you're having a few drinks, be sure to plan ahead and get home safely. We don't want to pick you up. Drinking drivers risk injuries to themselves and others and take chances with their license, their jobs, and their future. Remember what's at stake and choose your ride, whether you're the driver, the passenger, or the party host. Thanks for supporting sober driving. I hope we never meet.
Visit arrivealive.org to find out more.
Ottawa's local shops, restaurants, and services are woven into the fabric of our city. We can all help them during these challenging times. Order from them online, purchase gift certificates to use later, order meals for takeout or delivery, send them messages of support on social media. Please do it today. Learn how at ottawa.ca/buylocal.
Join us as we look back at previous investiture ceremonies honoring great Canadians. Watch the Order of Canada exclusively on Rogers TV.
Hi, welcome back to Ottawa Experts. I'm your host, Barbara Balfour. On tonight's show, we're talking about better mental health in 2021 with very special guests, Dr. Shimmy Kang, Dr. Kim Hellmans, and Sophie Gray. Before we went to Gray, Shimmy, you gave us a wonderful view into a healthy tech diet and the different types of technology that exist and how they may or may not meet certain needs. But I wanted to segue back to Kim and ask you a little bit about some of the work that you do with male and female university students when it comes to how they use technology or how they seek out connection. Tell us a little bit about some of the differences that you've observed and some of the key trends.
Sure, and I really loved Shimmy's explanation of the different types of tech. I never really heard that before, so I'm going to have to definitely grab your book. But what we ask our students, so there's two things. Number one, each of the students that do our studies, they fill in what's called a Bergen Social Media Disorder Scale. So it tells us how much they're using social media and to what extent they're using it potentially problematically. And it's been adopted from addiction literature. So the similar questions that we ask about, say, alcohol use or cannabis use, we're asking about their use with social media. So every student fills that in. And then we also ask them explicitly, how are they coping with the COVID-19 pandemic? So we had kind of like a grid, like, were you using Netflix? Were you using sweet foods? Were you using social media, et cetera, et cetera? And two really interesting findings came up in our studies. Number one, more females than males indicated that they were coping with the stress of the COVID-19 pandemic with social media. So that was an interesting finding. And number two, more females were scoring higher on that Bergen Social Media Disorder Scale than males. So more females are using social media more problematically. And this is really interesting because, sorry, go ahead.
How do you mean by problematic?
So because we can't really call it social media addiction, it's not recognized as a diagnostic term. We tend to, as scientists, we call it problematic use, which is kind of the same thing as if you're using cannabis or alcohol problematically, it suggests you might be using it with greater risk for harm. So what this is saying is that more of our female students are using social media with a greater risk for the harms associated with that, which I'm sure Shimmy could talk a lot about as well, is when you're using too much and you're actually using it to relieve the mood that you initially tried to get rid of, right? So you're feeling kind of anxious or you're feeling low or depressed and you're going on social media and then it's initially relieving it, but it's actually over time it's producing it, right? So we see that with other substances like alcohol or cocaine or nicotine. You might be using it because you feel kind of down or anxious, and then over time it actually produces more of those symptoms. So the one thing that's really important to know about female students and young females in their 20s is in particular, they seem to be quite impacted by social disconnection. So we have other scales in our studies that look at we ask students to basically evaluate their own social connectiveness. And what's interesting is that if more students, female students, are saying that they're lonely and socially disconnected, this relates more positively to depressive symptoms. So what that means is that when females are feeling socially disconnected, they're more likely to experience depressive symptoms. And that may also be driving their desire to go onto social media, and therefore also potentially the engine by which it produces that problematic social media use.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, Shimmy, in your book, The Tech Solution, you talk a lot about loneliness and how it's been blamed for everything from Brexit and the election of Donald Trump to mass killings. In your view, is it better to connect online than not at all?
Yeah, so I mean, I just want to thank Kim for that amazing research. And one thing I know we all understand and believe this, but just to make sure we're all inclusive, we know gender, of course, is not binary. There's a full spectrum, and so these are kind of general things. And in my book, I include boys are from Xbox and girls are from Instagram because of those trends that Kim just mentioned. So getting to your question, Barbara, is loneliness rates went up. In correlation, almost exact correlation with the when the iPhone hit 50% saturation in U.S. households. This is research by Dr. Twangy, and it is really profound to see that curve right along with that iPhone release. And what was happening, young people, their brains are really exquisitely sensitive to social connection. We do need to see each other. We need to hear each other's voices, and we need to see facial expression. Those are absolute key developers of empathy and releasers of that powerful neurohormone oxytocin. So real life connections are better. Now, we do know, though, that online, when we take the time to, video conferencing is better than a text or email for oxytocin release, and there are studies to support this. And even if you think of picking up the phone and just talking to someone and hearing that voice on the other end, versus like the little text message, 3 dots, or, it really adds to a quality of our relationship. So in the pandemic, I'm asking people, try your best or these moments to use tech to connect. And if you're out and about, I say, please talk and look at babies and toddlers, because they're seeing everyone wearing masks and on their phones, and they really need to have those little micro moments. So do it from a distance with your mask, but it's very important to make those real facial connections.
You had a really profound statistic or factoid in your book, Shimmy, that you are 30 times more likely to laugh in the presence of others than if you're all alone. Why do you think that is?
Well, we are truly social beings. The human brain evolved partly because we were social. Being social is what allowed that big leap in our human evolution. And in fact, I opened the book saying that the technology is the fire of our time, meaning early humans discovered how to innovate fire. And those who knew how to use it well went further and farther than ever before. And those who didn't got burnt down the village. And we're in the exact same place with technology. The fire of our time really is the phone. It's this device. If we know how to use it well, our children will go further and farther and do amazing innovations and contributions. And if they don't, they can get burned and burn down the house. So, I think that's part of what I was trying to say there.
That's a great analogy. Now, Sophie, I imagine many of the people who come to you seeking out resources and services are looking for a community, looking for a sense of belonging and acceptance. Talk to us a little bit about what it is that you offer and what it is that people are looking for.
Absolutely. So Dive Through is a mental wellness company that helps people dive through what they go through. We work with mental health professionals to create resources that help people take charge of their mental well-being. So from articles and podcasts to video series and courses, we offer a wide range of really online content that's accessible, easy to use, and free. So a lot of free resources. And one of the biggest things that we've noticed and our efforts are really focused on making sure that when we deliver those resources, it's in a way that anyone can understand. And when I talk about accessibility, of course, being in a digital age, there is a requirement for a phone, computer, Wi-Fi, which isn't a luxury for everyone. But there's an accessibility, of course, in the price. But then I also think in the way it can be received and understood. So we really want to simplify things to really help you understand your mind, understand what's going on, understand those stresses, anxiety that you're feeling. But then on top of that psychoeducation that we offer through our free resources, a big part of that is a community-based reminding you that you're not alone. I think that can be such a powerful thing for so many people to read something and see the comments and engage with other people to be like, oh, me too, or I get that, I feel that too. And even that in itself can really help people manage their mental health. And up until this point, it's been such a shameful topic, and that lack of transparency, not talking about it with the people around you, can really worsen the symptoms that you're feeling, or how you're feeling overall. So what we found is, by creating this kind of open community within our app, within our social channels, within our website, that gives people the space to feel seen and heard. That, on top of the psychoeducation, I think is a powerful combination, and at least that's what we've been told by our community members.
Seeing the stigma be lifted must be so gratifying, and I want to hear more about that when we come back after the break. We'll be right back.
Salt. Toast is burning.
Toast is not.
Every time she has a seizure, she smells something burning. Now, if we can provoke that smell by probing the surface of the brain, we'll find the source of the seizures. Mrs. Gold, do you feel anything?
I can see the most wonderful lights.
And now what do you feel?
Did you pour cold water on my hand, Dr. Penfield?
Now what? What is it, Mrs. Gold?
Burnt toast. Dr. Penfield, I can smell burnt toast. Dr. Wilder Penfield. He cured my seizures and hundreds more. They say he drew the roadmap of the human brain. We just called him the greatest Canadian alive.
Hey, did you know?
More than 4,500 Canadians are waiting for an organ transplant right now.
Right now. 4,500.
People are dying.
And you could save a life. 90% of Canadians say they're willing to donate their organs.
But only a few are registered.
So what are you waiting for? Get registered.
It's easy and it's free.
Leave a legacy. Be a hero.
Save a life.
Find out how to register today. Go to kidney.ca.
Hi, I'm Harriet Clooney. Come check out my show, Scrap Cooking, where I'm going to show you how to use the bits and bobs, the ends, pieces of things that you might otherwise throw in the compost. I'm going to show you how to turn them into something delicious.
Welcome back to Ottawa Experts. I'm your host, Barbara Balfour, and you're watching a show on how to enjoy better mental health in 2021 with special guests Dr. Kim Hellmans, Dr. Shimmy Kang, and Sophie Gray. Shimmy, I wanted to ask you about something that you mentioned in your book, that there seem to be certain people who live their lives with passion and joy and meaning all the time, the ones who seem to always have a sunny disposition and a positive attitude. And through your research, you discovered the one thing that they're doing differently than the rest of us. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, Barbara. So that was actually in The Dolphin Parent. And, you know, it was I wanted to give the message, what actually leads to the success? What is the science of success? Because parents, we were thinking, is it, more piano or more math? And really there are two ingredients to success, whether you're a plant, animal, company, empire, or organization. The first is survival of the fittest, which actually means is the most adaptable. Okay, so adaptability is the fit to an ever-changing world. We knew this before. We really know it now in the pandemic, is those of us who are able to adapt to all the changes, we're able to come out more resilient. So survival of the fittest, adaptability. The second part of that equation we often forget was called diversity of the species. We need to be different, and we need to be around people who are different than us. That's how we exchange ideas. That's how we innovate. So those two things, adaptability and diversity, equals success. That is the science, no matter who you are.
Now, I want to go back to Kim and ask you about one of your research topics, which is why are some people more vulnerable to addiction than others?
Well, most of the science really does support that the biggest predictor of whether somebody develops an addiction is their early life experiences, and in particular, whether they've experienced stress. So many of us can consume alcohol, we can consume cannabis products. Some of us may even try a cigarette once in a while, and not actually develop a full-blown addiction. And that's why I say it's not the drug that's addictive; it's the combination. And here I am paraphrasing Dr. Gabor Mate, who wrote a book called In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. Addiction is formed by a vulnerable individual, an addictive substance or behavior, and stress. And so what we see is somebody's experiences with early life trauma or stress does something to rewire the brain to render key neural circuits that are implicated in addiction and reward more vulnerable. And so we don't really know how that happens, and that's sort of what I like to try to understand. How does adversity get under the skin? But we do know that this early life trauma, what it does do is it seems to render the circuits in the brain that are responsible for coding for fear, it makes them more hyperactive. And the circuits in the brain that are responsible for feeling good, it makes them underactive. And when we consume substances or engage in rewarding and addictive behaviors like engaging with tech or pornography or what have you, it seems to render that fear circuit, it makes it go down, and it makes that reward circuit go back up. So now we're in this much more happy balance, and that seems to be what's driving the addictive behaviors in the future.
Now, on the flip side, what have you discovered are some universally positive coping strategies for stressors?
What I like to say is, this is not my own idea for sure, is that mental health, there's a number of pillars that support good mental health, right? And so one of them is healthy amounts of sleep. Another one is, as she was speaking about, with diet, right? Having a good, varied, healthy diet. Another one is exercise. And then the fourth pillar is social connectivity. And so when we are stressed, if you can imagine any point in our lives when we're experiencing acute stress, some of us will want to eat donuts and muffins. Some of us may not sleep very well, and others will maybe turn to Netflix and try to chill out with Netflix. But the thing that we do know that seems to support good stress coping is things like exercise, right? So aerobic exercise is one of the greatest things that we can do to combat those effects of the stress. And in fact, there was a recent study that was, the data have recently been put out by Health Canada showing that Canadians who reported exercising outdoors during the COVID-19 pandemic also seem to have reported less levels of mental health symptoms, so less levels of depression and anxiety. Again, we can't say causality here. This is a correlational relationship, but there is good evidence from the neuroscience literature that when we engage in aerobic exercise, it pumps lots of oxygen and glucose up into the brain. It promotes growth factors. It also engages circuits in the brain that are known to be involved in coping with stress, and seems to make individuals more resilient to the negative effects of stress in the future.
I can certainly attest personal perspective that spending more time outside during the first wave of the pandemic really helped calm me down. Now, Sophie, I'm wondering, as an entrepreneur who's trying to get a new business up off the ground, and then you get hit by this global pandemic, what were some of the things that you did that helped you deal with the stress and preserve your mental health that you would recommend to others as well?
Absolutely. While I have definitely been incredibly fortunate to have not necessarily had that dip that other businesses have. My husband works in hospitality and has unfortunately had to lay off over 300 team members twice. So having both his experience in restaurants and building that business, and then mine in an online business, I think the biggest thing that one can do is to really practice self-compassion. And it's such a simple, but in my opinion, radical approach of giving yourself the space to feel how you're feeling, show up as you are, and be okay with that. And some days where all the healthiest thing that you can do for yourself is watching all the Netflix and eating all the chocolate. But if that's what you need in that moment, giving yourself the space and being compassionate enough to allow yourself that break. One of the most challenging things that I've experienced personally in this, and then really feel for my team as well, is this need to still be productive. And one of the things in our company, our team members, we ask every day, what have you done for your mental health lately? And what we really talk about are super simple things of like, yesterday I went for a walk, or today I ate McDonald's because that's what I really wanted. And no, it's not the healthiest, and no, it's not physically great for you if we want to use those labels, but that's what my mind wanted in that moment, because I just need to give myself that win in a way. So I think that really comes down to being okay with not being the most productive, not writing off these things that we do that we think we're wasting time with, sleeping extra, watching TV, sometimes scrolling on your phone, again, when it's done mindfully, that's okay. And I think the pandemic has really allowed us to step out a little bit of these kind of social structures of what we think we should be doing at all times, and really build a schedule that works for us. And I think that's something that I'm going to fight for myself to keep post-pandemic, when maybe we return office setting, I'm not sure, but really listening to my body, even when it might not be the conventional healthy thing to do, if it works for me, really giving myself that win and respecting what I need in that moment.
I hear everything you're saying, Sophie, and with regards to watching all the Netflix and eating all the chocolate, I think I need to put that on a bumper sticker or something like that. It needs to be my mantra for 2021. Shimi, I want to segue over to you. You sent us a graphic that we'll pull up on the screen here about some key house rules for kids and families to have a healthy relationship with technology. And of course, keeping in mind that the same rules can be just as applicable to adults as they are to kids and teens. Talk us through some of the more important points.
Sure. Yeah. So these are really practical rules to establish healthy habits in your home. So some basic stuff like tech-free times, dinner time. The family meal is one of the most robust findings in all of child development. When we sit and eat together, practice gratitude, or celebrate our day, we know children have better mental health, physical health, academic performance. So tech-free times, family meal, bedtime, in the cars, tech-free zones, again, kitchen table, bedrooms, and then maybe taking a digital day off or a digital afternoon off, shutting off the Wi-Fi at 9 o'clock or pick a time. These are really common sense rules, but I want to just back up and say, even before these rules, there's a foundation that I talk about in the book, which is delay tech use as long as you can. I don't know any toddler nowadays that's going to need an iPad, but we do know there's negativity and harm associated with early tech use, including myelination issues in the brain. If you are going to introduce a device, please don't give your child a phone. Let them borrow yours so you can maintain that authority and passwords and take it back if they can't handle it. And really establish 3 key life skills before you introduce devices. Those are time management, social skills, and emotional regulation skills. And teach children that tech is not a toy, it is a tool. And they can use it in the service of their health, happiness, and success, not necessarily in that persuasive design, those dopamine-driven manipulations that are there to attract and hook us. So all of those and many more solutions are really there. I do want to touch really quickly on something Kim and Sophie both brought up. One of the important coping skills that tech is interfering with is play. Play is a very powerful coping skill. It releases serotonin from our brain. And that is in addition to that routine, regular sleep, exercise, social connection. Also when we play outside, what we talked about is getting outside. Humans are biophilic. We need nature. Nature is our portal to endorphin and mindfulness and that parasympathetic nervous system of relaxation. Sophie brought up perfectionism really is rising, particularly among young women and girls. And so the opposite of perfectionism is play. So let's be kind and gentle. Let's not be perfectionists. And let's also remember to play.
Now, you wrote in your book, The Tech Solution, that you're giving a copy of away to our viewers in the show today. In your book, you write that you were in your 40s when you suddenly discovered the reason for years of excruciating chronic pain, which was a genetic illness that had never been found or diagnosed before. How did that affect your mental health, and how were you able to remain kind to yourself during this time, and with your children as well? What are some of the things that you do for yourself?
Right. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. That was really tough because I have a disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So my body doesn't make enough collagen. It wasn't a big deal. I was just a bit like lax in my joints earlier, but after 40, we lose collagen and I hit a wall. I ended up in a serious chronic pain. I actually went on disability as a psychiatrist, which was heartbreaking because I love my work. And I went on opioids actually. And I say technology partly was the cause of that because I didn't take care of myself. I was a medical director. I was writing books. I was checking my email. I was constantly on. Once I figured things out, technology became a key part to my healing. I found an online group that's actually how I discovered what I had as I read other people's stories. I ordered my own genetic test, which I couldn't get access to. It was a 2-year waiting list. And then I got very serious about self-care. I started doing meditation and, mindfulness, and my phone, I took classes, master classes on meditation. There was moments where I couldn't move my body and all I could do was lie there in bed with my headphones and music. So on both ends, tech really led to my illness, but it also helped in my recovery. And I think that's really, again, points to the power of this important innovation at our time.
I want to thank all three of you so much for joining us tonight and for sharing your journey and bringing us some really great tips on positive coping strategies and how to deal with stress going into 2020 and beyond. Thanks to all of you once again for your wisdom and insights. And if you're watching us tonight, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again, same time next week. Have a great night.
Call the Rogers TV Viewer Response Line. Email us or connect with us on social media.
It's about sharing and caring. It's about doing and belonging. It's about living life to its fullest. And it's about laughing out loud. We are L'Arche Canada, and we're about witnessing and sharing the gifts of all people. Learn more about us today.
Each week on Grill This, Smoke That, Steph Legary showcases delicious recipes from across Canada, all done on the grill. Join Steph and his special guests on Grill This, Smoke That, Fridays on Rogers TV.
This is Rogers.